My mother raised her glass, making sure her laughter at my expense carried across the entire restaurant. My brother sat there soaking up the praise, while I remained nothing more than a punchline. What they did not know was that the luxury penthouse they were bragging about actually belonged to me. I held a secret truth in my hands that was about to shatter the perfect image they had spent 30 years building for him. My name is Sarah Olson, and if there is one thing I have learned from 10 years of high-stakes asset management at Caldwell Meridian Capital, it is that the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the most to hide. In the boardroom, silence is a weapon. In my family, silence is a role I was assigned at birth, a costume I was forced to wear so my brother could shine a little brighter. We were seated at the best table in the Gilded Stag, the most pretentious restaurant in Beacon Heights. The tablecloths were white linen, heavy and starch stiff. Much like the conversation, my mother had insisted on this place. She wanted an audience. The dining room was filled with the kind of people who spent $80 on an appetizer without blinking, the exact demographic my mother desperately wanted to be associated with. I took a small sip of my water, watching the way the candlelight caught the gold rim of my wine glass. Across the table, my brother, Grant, was leaning back in his chair, his chest puffed out like a rooster that had just convinced the sun to rise. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost $2,000 because he had left the tag on the floor of the hallway the last time he visited home, knowing our mother would pick it up. "The view is just incredible, really," Grant said, his voice carrying just loud enough for the table next to us to hear. He swirled his Cabernet with a practiced motion he must have seen in a movie. "You can see the entire skyline from the balcony. Waking up to that every morning? It changes your mindset. It puts you in a different tax bracket mentally." My mother, Linda, clasped her hands together, her eyes shimmering with an adoration that bordered on religious devotion. "I am just so proud of you, Grant, a penthouse, in Beacon Heights. Do you know what Mrs. Gable said when I told her?" She went completely silent. She could not believe it. Her son is still renting that awful little studio downtown. I cut into my steak, keeping my eyes on the plate. The meat was rare, bleeding slightly onto the white porcelain. I focused on the geometry of it, the precision of the knife, anything to drown out the nausea rising in my throat. "It is not just about the view, Linda," Grant said, dropping the mom to sound more sophisticated. "It is about the equity. Real estate is the only game that matters right now. You have to buy in when the market is hot. That place is going to appreciate 15% by next year. Easy." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. 15%. He threw out numbers like confetti, colorful and ultimately trash to be swept up later. I managed a portfolio of commercial assets worth over $400 million at Caldwell Meridian. I knew the market trends in this city down to the square foot. The Beacon Heights luxury market had plateaued 6 months ago, but facts had no place at this table. This was a theater production, and we all had our scripts. Next to Grant sat Sloane, his girlfriend of 6 months. She was pretty in a sharp, angular way, with hair that looked like it had been ironed into submission. She had her phone out, scrolling through a gallery of photos she had taken earlier that evening. "You guys, look at this lighting," Sloane chirped, turning the screen toward my father and me. The screen showed Grant standing on a balcony, holding a cigar he probably did not smoke, with the city lights blurring behind him. "I posted this 20 minutes ago and it already has 150 likes. People are freaking out. They keep asking if it is an Airbnb or a hotel." "And you told them it is his, right?" my mother asked sharply, her smile tightening. "Make sure they know he owns it." "Of course, Linda," Sloane said, rolling her eyes playfully. "I captioned it, 'Home Sweet Penthouse.' Everyone is so jealous. My friend Jessica is literally dying. She just bought a condo in the suburbs, and she is furious that Grant is living like a king." "He works hard," my mother declared, looking around the table as if challenging anyone to disagree. "He deserves every square inch of that luxury. He took risks." I chewed slowly. Grant did take risks, but they were usually with other people's money, or with the truth. He was 34 years old, 2 years older than me, and while he cycled through entrepreneurial ventures that never seemed to turn a profit, I had quietly built a career based on cold, hard logic. Then, the spotlight shifted. I felt the change in atmospheric pressure before I even saw my mother turn her head. It was the moment I had been dreading since the appetizers arrived. "Sarah," my mother said. Her voice dropped an octave, feigning concern but laced with poison. "You have been very quiet tonight." I placed my fork down. "Just listening. Mom, the food is good." "Are you not happy for your brother?" she asked. It was a trap. It was always a trap. "Of course I am," I said, my voice steady. "It is a beautiful apartment." "It is a penthouse, Sarah," she corrected me instantly. "There is a difference, and it makes me wonder. You are 32 now, same generation, same upbringing. Why are you still renting that little place on 4th Street? "I like my apartment," I said. "It is close to the office. It is practical." Grant laughed, a short, barking sound. "Practical. That is the word for it. All right, come on. Sarah, you have been at that firm for what, 10 years? You are still pushing paper while the real players are buying assets. You have got to leverage your capital. You are playing it too safe. Scared money does not make money." "I am doing just fine, Grant," I said, keeping my tone mild. "Are you?" My mother leaned in, her gold bracelets clinking against the table edge. "Because honestly, Sarah, it is embarrassing. When people ask me about my children, I tell them Grant just bought a penthouse overlooking the river, and then they ask about you. And what do I say? Sarah is working. It looks like you are falling behind. It looks like you do not have any ambition." I looked at my father, Howard. He was sitting at the head of the table, methodically buttering a roll. He heard every word. He heard the condescension, the cruelty, the blatant rewriting of reality. He knew I had paid off their car loan last year. He knew who signed the check when the roof on their house needed replacing. "Dad?" I said softly. Howard looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief second before darting away. He took a bite of his bread, chewed, and swallowed. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and said nothing. He just looked back down at his plate. The silence from him was a physical blow, harder than anything my mother could scream. He was the neutral party, the Switzerland of our family war. But in situations like this, neutrality was complicit. Sloane giggled, breaking the tension with the grace of a sledgehammer. "Oh my God. Sarah, do not feel bad. Not everyone is cut out for the high life. Maybe when Grant and I move to an even bigger place in a few years, you can rent the penthouse from us? We would give you a family discount." My mother burst out laughing. It was a shrill, delighted sound. "Oh, that is a wonderful idea. Did you hear that? Grant, you could be your sister's landlord. At least then the money would stay in the family." Grant grinned, swirling his wine again. "I do not know. Mom, I run a tight ship. I would need a security deposit up front. No special treatment." They all laughed. My mother, my brother, his girlfriend, even my father offered a weak, polite chuckle, just to go along with the flow. They were laughing at my apparent mediocrity, at my caution, at the smallness of the life they thought I lived. I sat there, frozen, feeling the heat rise up my neck, but I did not let it reach my face. I had trained for this in boardrooms with men far more intimidating than Grant Olson. I locked my emotions in a box, sealed it tight, and buried it deep. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I need to check a work email." "Always working, never living," my mother sighed, shaking her head. "That is your problem, Sarah." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with a notification I had set up weeks ago, a specific alert from the property management software my holding company used. I unlocked the phone and opened the app. The penthouse Grant was so proud of was indeed a magnificent property. I knew this because I had purchased it 6 months ago under a limited liability company named Blue Heron Holdings. I had bought it as a distressed asset, renovated it, and put it on the rental market at a premium price. I looked at the tenant file on my screen. Tenant. Name, Grant Olson, lease. Start date, August 1st. Monthly rent, $8,500. Payment status, past due days. Delinquent, 92 days. My thumb hovered over the screen. Grant wasn't the owner, he was the tenant. And he wasn't even a good tenant. He hadn't paid a single cent since the security deposit. I looked up from my phone. Grant was toasting with Sloane, clinking their glasses together, celebrating a victory that did not exist. My mother was beaming at them, the proud matriarch of a fantasy. "Is everything okay, Sarah?" Grant asked, noticing my stare. "You look a little pale. Work trouble? Boss yelling at you?" I stared at him for a long moment. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized the prey was already caught in the trap. "No trouble, Grant," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "Just a notification about a delinquent account. Some people just do not know how to pay their bills." "Hate that for you," Grant said dismissively, turning back to his steak. "Glad I do not have to deal with that petty stuff anymore." I looked back down at the phone. The notification was flashing red. Action required. Initiate eviction proceedings. I didn't swipe it away. I let it sit there, glowing in the dim light of the restaurant. The laughter at the table continued, loud and confident, echoing off the walls of the life they thought they owned. But the deed to that life was in my digital pocket, and the rent was due. The silence of my apartment was usually my sanctuary, but tonight it felt heavy, pressing against my temples like a physical weight. I locked the deadbolt behind me, the mechanical click echoing in the hallway. My home on 4th Street was not a penthouse. It was a third-floor unit in a restored brick building, modest by the standards of Beacon Heights, but it was mine. I owned it outright. There was no mortgage, no bank hovering over my shoulder, and certainly no need to lie about who held the deed. I kicked off my heels near the door and walked into the living room. The space was curated with a minimalist precision that my mother called barren and I called peaceful. The furniture was authentic mid-century, the lines clean and sharp. There were no piles of unpaid bills on the counter, no frantic post-it notes, no facade of a lifestyle I could not afford. Everything here was real. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hand trembling slightly. It was not fear. It was a cold, simmering rage that I had been trained to suppress for 3 decades. The dinner had drained me. Listening to my mother rewrite reality to suit her golden boy was exhausted. But watching my father sit there and let it happen was a specific kind of heartbreak I should have been used to by now. I walked into my home office and sat down at my desk. It was time to stop feeling and start auditing. I woke up my laptop and logged into the secure server of Caldwell Meridian Capital, then navigated to the private folder for my personal holdings. Blue Heron Holdings, LLC. It was a shell company I had formed 5 years ago to separate my personal assets from my professional liability. It was a standard move in my industry, a layer of privacy that kept my name off public records. I opened the file for the property at the Summit Tower, Unit 40B, the Penthouse. On the screen, the truth was laid out in black and white pixels. Indifferent to my mother's pride or my brother's ego, the owner of record was Blue Heron Holdings. The purchase date was 6 months ago. I had bought it as a distressed asset from a tech CEO who had over-leveraged himself, picking it up for 20% under market value. It was a cold investment decision. Then I clicked on the tenant folder. There was his name, Grant Olson. He was not the owner. He was a tenant on a 12-month lease, and he was a terrible one at that. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The absurdity of it was almost impressive. Grant was living in a property I owned, throwing parties in a living room I had paid for, and using the address to humiliate me in public. He was playing the role of the king in a castle built by the sister he mocked. My mind drifted back, unbidden, to when we were children. It was a sunny afternoon in July. I was 10. Grant was 12. We were in the backyard. Grant had taken my father's expensive new set of golf clubs out of the garage, swinging them wildly at stones near the greenhouse. I remembered the sound of shattering glass, crisp, loud, and final. He had put a driver straight through the greenhouse pane. When my father came home, Grant had turned on the tears instantly. He didn't deny it. He just spun it. He said he was trying to practice so he could be like Dad. He said he wanted to make Dad proud. My mother had melted. She hugged him, told him accidents happened, and praised his ambition. Then she turned to me. I was standing there, holding the broom I had fetched to clean up the glass. "Sarah," she had said, her voice tight, "why didn't you stop him? You know he gets excited. You need to look out for your brother. Now go help your father clean this up." I was 10 years old, sweeping up shards of glass while Grant went inside to have lemonade. I was the responsible one, the tedious one, the one who cleaned up the mess so Grant could keep shining. "Not anymore," I whispered to the empty room. I turned back to the screen. I needed to see the full picture. I knew Grant was behind on rent, but I wanted to see the communication log. I utilized a third-party property management firm to handle the day-to-day operations so that my name never appeared on tenant correspondence. To Grant, his landlord was just a faceless corporate entity. I opened the correspondence log. October 5th. Second notice of overdue rent sent. October 15th. Late fee applied. November 1st. Third notice. Warning of eviction procedures. November 10th. Tenant replied, promising wire transfer within 48 hours. The wire transfer never came. He was stalling. He was probably using the money Sloan thought was going toward a mortgage to pay for dinners like the one tonight. I hit the print button. The laser printer in the corner hummed to life. I wanted hard copies. I wanted the weight of the paper in my hand, the lease agreement, the payment history full of zeros and red flags, the emails where he lied to the property manager about banking errors and frozen assets. As the pages slid into the tray, I began to organize them into a timeline. It was a habit from my work: build the case, excessive leverage, poor cash flow, distressed asset. Grant was a distressed asset. I picked up the original lease application. I wanted to see how he had even qualified. The Summit Tower had strict financial requirements. You needed a credit score of 750 or higher, or proof of liquid assets equal to 3 times the total lease value. I knew for a fact Grant did not have that kind of credit. 2 years ago, I had to co-sign a car loan for him because his score was in the low 500s after a failed dropshipping business maxed out his credit cards. So how did he get approved for a penthouse that cost $8,500 a month? I scanned the application. Income stated, $300,000 a year, a lie. Employer, self-employed consultant. Vague enough to pass a cursory glance, but usually that would trigger a request for tax returns. Then I saw it. The section marked guarantor. If a tenant could not meet the financial requirements on their own, they could have a guarantor sign the lease, someone who agreed to be legally responsible for the rent if the tenant defaulted. The box was checked. My heart skipped a beat, then hammered against my ribs. I flipped to the last page of the document, the addendum for the guarantor. There was a signature at the bottom. Sarah Olson. I stared at it. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, thinking perhaps the wine at dinner had affected my vision. I looked again. It was my name. It was written in a script that looked terrifyingly similar to my own. The loop of the S was sweeping and tall. The H at the end trailed off with a sharp line. To a stranger. To a leasing agent who did not know me. It looked legitimate. But I knew my own hand. I knew the pressure I put on the pen. I knew that I never crossed my A that high. I had not signed this. I sat perfectly still, the paper trembling slightly in my grip. This was not just Grant being irresponsible. This was not just him borrowing money he could not pay back. He had stolen my identity. He had used my name, my credit rating, my financial reputation to secure the apartment he was using to belittle me. He knew I had the credit score to pass the check. He knew I had the assets. He had likely used a copy of my driver's license from when we went on that family trip to Cabo last year. I had let him hold my passport and ID while I went through security. He must have taken a photo. A cold realization washed over me. The 3 months of unpaid rent? They were not just ruining his credit, they were ruining mine. If the management company reported this to the credit bureaus, it would be on my report. I was the guarantor. I was liable. I looked at the date on the signature, August 1st. 3 months ago, while I was busy closing a $50 million deal in Chicago, my brother was sitting somewhere, perhaps at our parents' kitchen table, carefully practicing my signature so he could live like a king on my dime. And my mother? Did she know? The thought made me nauseous. Mom was an enabler. Yes, she was blind to his faults. But would she condone a felony? I looked at the witness signature next to the guarantor line. It was scribbled, illegible, but the date matched. I put the paper down on the desk. The anger that had been simmering was gone. In its place was something much colder, much harder. It was the feeling of steel hardening. They wanted to play games. They wanted to pretend they were high society. They wanted to laugh at me for being the cautious, boring sister who didn't know how to live. I reached for a red pen from my desk organizer. I circled the forged signature. I did not scream. I did not throw the glass of water against the wall. I simply opened a new drawer in my mind, the one reserved for hostile takeovers and litigation. Grant had made a fatal error. He thought I was just his sister. He forgot that I was also his landlord. And now, I was his victim. But victims in my world did not cry. They sued. I picked up my phone. It was late, past 11 at night, but I sent a text to the head of legal at my firm, a man who owed me a favor for saving his department from a compliance nightmare last year. Need a forensic handwriting analyst. Discreet? First thing in the morning. I set the phone down next to the forged document. The next family dinner was going to be very different. I wasn't going to bring an appetite. I was going to bring a subpoena. The digital parade began before I had even finished my first cup of coffee on Monday morning. My phone vibrated against the marble countertop, lighting up with notification after notification. It was a symphony of narcissism, conducted entirely by my brother. I opened Instagram, and there it was. Grant had posted a photo of the sunrise taken from the balcony of Unit 40B. He was holding a mug of espresso, looking pensively toward the horizon. The caption read, "Empire State of Mind. Nothing beats the view from the top. Penthouse. Life. Self-made grind never stops." I scrolled down. The comments were a flood of sycophantic applause. "King," wrote one of his frat brothers. "You deserve this. Bro," wrote another. And there, right at the top, was a comment from my mother. "My shining star. So proud of the man you have become." It was nauseating. It was also completely delusional. The man grinding in the photo was 92 days late on his rent and had forged his sister's signature to get the keys. But the performance did not stop with Grant. Sloane was running her own parallel campaign of deception. I saw a post on her feed where she was holding up paint swatches against the living room wall. My wall, which I had paid a contractor $3,000 to paint a specific shade of dove gray just 6 months ago, thinking of going warmer for the winter. She had captioned it, "We are putting in an offer to buy the place outright next month. The owner is practically begging us to take it off his hands. Homeowner Interiors." I nearly choked on my coffee. Begging us to take it off his hands. The audacity was breathtaking. I was the owner. And the only thing I was begging for was a forensic handwriting analysis, which was currently being processed by a specialist my legal team had recommended. My phone rang. The caller ID flashed Mom. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. I needed to compose my voice, to flatten any sharp edges of rage into a smooth surface of indifference. "Hello, Mom," I said. "Sarah, honey," Linda's voice came through, dripping with that specific brand of maternal concern that was actually a scouting mission. "I was just calling to check on you. You left the dinner so abruptly the other night. I was worried you were upset." "I had work to do, Mom. You know how it is." I know," she sighed. But sometimes I worry that you work so hard to fill a void. Sarah, seeing Grant so happy, so successful, I know it can be hard. Sibling rivalry is natural, but I just want to make sure you are not letting jealousy eat you up. It is not a good look on a woman your age. I walked over to the window of my apartment. I am not jealous of Grant, Mom, I promise you. Good, she said, her tone hardening slightly. Because he has worked very hard for this. He took risks you were never willing to take. He deserves his moment. I do not want you raining on his parade with your practicality. Just be happy for him. Can you do that? I am watching his parade with great interest, I replied. Believe me. That is all I ask, she said, brightening up. Oh, and we are thinking of doing Thanksgiving at the Penthouse this year. Grant offered, it will be so much more spacious than your father's house. You will come, won't you? Unless you are working. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. I hung up. The gaslighting was so practiced, so seamless, that if I did not have the deed to the penthouse in my digital safe, I might have actually questioned my own sanity. 10 minutes later, my father called. This was the 1-2 punch of the Olsen family dynamic. Mom threw the jab. Dad came in to smooth over the bruise, asking you not to bleed on the carpet. Hey, kiddo, Howard said. He sounded tired. He always sounded tired. Hi, Dad. Your mother is a little worked up, he said, skipping the pleasantries. She thinks you are holding a grudge about the dinner. I am not holding a grudge, Dad. I am holding facts. Sarah, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Look, I know Grant can be a lot. I know he likes to show off. But let him have this. He needs a win. He has had a rough couple of years. If he says he bought the place, just nod and smile. What does it hurt? It makes your mother happy. It hurts the truth, Dad, I said. And it hurts my wallet, considering I stopped myself. I almost told him. I almost screamed that Grant was stealing from me right now, that I was the guarantor he had defrauded. But I held back. If I told Howard, he would tell Linda. Linda would tell Grant, and Grant would run. He would disappear, or destroy the apartment, or spin some new lie to make me the villain. No, I needed them all in the same room when the hammer dropped. Considering he what? Howard asked. Considering he implies I'm a failure every time he opens his mouth, I finished. He does not mean it, Howard said, the eternal peacemaker. Just don't be difficult, Sarah, please, for me. I won't be difficult, Dad, I said, a cold resolve settling in my chest. I will be perfectly fair. The day wore on. I went to the office, sat through meetings, reviewed portfolios, and acted like a normal person. But beneath the surface, my mind was a war room. Around 3 p.m, my private line rang. It was Grant. Hey, sis, he said. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. It was his salesman voice. How is the corporate grind treating you? Busy, Grant. What do you need? Need? Nothing. Just wanted to catch up with my favorite sister. He laughed. Actually, now that you mention it, I have a little proposition for you. A shimmering opportunity. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair. I am listening. So, here is the deal, Grant said, his speed increasing. My assets are a little tied up right now. You know how it is with real estate. All your cash is locked in equity. I have this killer investment opportunity in crypto. A friend of mine is launching a new coin next week. It is going to moon. Sarah, guaranteed 10x returns. And I am a little illiquid at the moment because of the down payment I put on the penthouse, he lied. So I was thinking, if you could float me, say $15,000, just for 2 weeks, I would cut you in for 20% of the profit. It is literally free money. $15,000. That was roughly the amount of the back rent plus late fees. He wasn't trying to invest in crypto. He was trying to pay me with my own money to keep the eviction notice off his door, without ever knowing he was paying me. I don't do crypto, Grant. You know that. Come on, Sarah. Don't be a dinosaur. this is the future. Look, I am doing you a favor here. Mom said you were feeling a little left behind. I want to help you build your portfolio." The condescension was incredible. He was asking for a handout while pretending to be a philanthropist. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "I have a question about the Penthouse." "Yeah? What about it? The view? The marble floors?" "The purchase," I said. "I was looking at the market data for that building. It is a very exclusive list. Who was the seller? I might know them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was brief, perhaps only 2 seconds, but it was heavy. "Oh, you wouldn't know him," Grant said, his voice dipping slightly. "He was a private investor, kept to himself, very low profile, older guy, moving to Florida." "Really?" I pressed. "Because most of the units in the Summit Tower are owned by shell companies or trusts. Was it an individual?" Yeah, totally," Grant stammered. "Look, Sarah, the details are boring. Legal stuff. My lawyers handled it. I didn't get into the weeds with the guy. Why the 3rd degree?" "Just curious," I said. "I like to know who my neighbors are, or who my brother's business partners are." "Well, he is gone now, out of the picture. Place is mine," Grant said, regaining his bravado. "So, about that 15,000? Can you wire it today? I really need to move on this coin before the pre-sale closes." "I can't do it, Grant." "What? Seriously?" His tone snapped from charming to aggressive in a nanosecond. "You have the money sitting there. Sarah, I know you do. You are just being stingy. You want to see me fail." "I want to see you be honest," I said. "You are unbelievable," he spat. "Mom was right. You are bitter. You can't stand that I made it. Fine, forget it. I will get the money somewhere else. I have investors lining up." He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was a private investor, older guy, moving to Florida. He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. This meant the broker he used, if he even used a broker, had likely dealt with my property management firm's automated system or a leasing agent who simply processed the paperwork without ever mentioning the owner's name. Or, more likely, Grant had never looked at the lease closely enough to see Blue Heron Holdings listed as the landlord. He just saw a set of keys and a stage for his ego. But there was something else, the private investor lie. He had constructed a character. He wasn't just lying about owning the apartment. He was lying about the transaction itself. He had invented a seller. He had invented a negotiation. It wasn't just Grant. My mother was reinforcing it. My father was protecting it. Sloan was decorating it. They were all living in a shared hallucination, a house of cards built on a foundation of my stolen credit and my property. I looked at the calendar on my desk. Thanksgiving was in 3 weeks, but my birthday was coming up sooner. Next Friday. My mother had mentioned a birthday dinner, another public event, another chance for them to perform. I picked up my pen and wrote a note on my legal pad. Deadline, Friday. Grant thought he had investors lining up. He was wrong. The only thing lining up was a process server, and I was going to make sure he arrived right before dessert. The cracks were not just forming anymore. The whole structure was groaning under the weight of their lies, and I was about to kick out the load-bearing wall. Tuesday morning found me in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of Caldwell Meridian's internal compliance department, the air conditioning humming a low, monotonous note that matched the throbbing behind my eyes. I had not slept. Instead, I had spent the hours between midnight and dawn dissecting the anatomy of a betrayal. On the screen in front of me was the digital corpse of my brother's integrity, the guarantor addendum. I had scrutinized the physical printout the night before, but the digital forensic analysis told a far more damning story. I had pulled the metadata from the file uploaded to the Blue Heron tenant portal. It was not just a scanned piece of paper, it was a digital construct. "Look at the modification history," I said, pointing at the screen. Sitting across from me was David, a senior risk analyst who had been with the firm as long as I had. He pushed his glasses up his nose, leaning in to squint at the lines of data. "Created on July 29th, David read aloud. Software used: Adobe Acrobat Pro, author, Grant Olson, modified, August 1st. He looked up at me, his expression grim. He didn't even scrub the author tag. Amateur. It gets worse, I said, clicking to the next tab. Look at the signature field. I had overlaid the signature on the document with 3 verified samples of my own signature from the company archives. To the naked eye, they looked similar, but under digital magnification, the hesitation marks were visible. The lines were too heavy at the start of the curves, indicating a hand that was drawing, not writing. It is a trace job, David confirmed, sitting back in his chair. He likely took a high-resolution photo of a document you signed previously, maybe a birthday card or an old check, and used the pen tool to trace over it on a tablet. Then he flattened the PDF to make it look like a single scanned image. And the submission method? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Direct upload to the portal, David said. He bypassed the email verification step. Usually, the system sends an email to the guarantor to confirm identity, but if the tenant marks the guarantor as present in person during the application process, the system allows for a manual upload of the signed form. He claimed you were sitting right there next to him when he hit submit. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was premeditated. It wasn't a panic move. Grant had sat at his computer, logged into the portal, checked a box lying that I was present, and then uploaded a forgery he had spent days perfecting. He used this to bypass the credit check, I said, my voice flat. That is the only reason he needed a guarantor. His credit score is in the 500s. The building requires 750. With my name attached, the system didn't even flag him. It saw Sarah Olson and green-lit the lease immediately. David looked at me with genuine sympathy. Sarah, you know what this is, right? This isn't just a family dispute. This is forgery in the 2nd degree. It is identity theft. It is wire fraud because he used the internet to transmit the document. If you report this to the authorities, he is looking at prison time, not a weekend in county jail. Real time. I know, I said. And there is another layer, David added, his voice lowering. Because he used your name to secure a lease in a building owned by your own holding company. He has created a compliance nightmare. If the bank auditing Blue Heron sees this, they could claim self-dealing or fraud on your part. They might think you put a non-paying tenant in there on purpose to inflate occupancy numbers, using a fake lease. That was the twist I hadn't fully calculated. Grant hadn't just put himself at risk. He had placed my entire professional reputation on the chopping block. If my firm found out I was effectively leasing to my brother who wasn't paying, and there was a forged document involved that I hadn't reported, I could lose my license. I could lose my job. He weaponized my credit against me, I whispered, and he put my career in the crosshairs to do it. What do you want to do? David asked. We can flag this legally right now. I can draft an affidavit of forgery. We can have the police at his door by noon. I looked at the screen, at the arrogant curve of the O in the signature that wasn't mine. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the way he swirled his wine and talked about mindset. I thought about my mother telling me I was jealous. If I sent the police now, my mother would spin it. She would say I was vindictive. She would say I overreacted to a mistake. She would paint Grant as the victim of a ruthless sister who cared more about paperwork than family. They would never believe he did it with malice. They would say he meant to tell me or intended to pay it back. No, I needed them to see the rot. I needed to strip away the veneer so thoroughly that even my mother's delusion couldn't survive the exposure. Not yet, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I need the affidavit prepared, but do not file it. Keep it in the vault. I need the full audit trail printed and notarized. I want a timeline of every IP address he used to access the portal. You are going to confront him? David asked. I am going to destroy him, I corrected. But I am going to do it on my terms. He likes an audience? I will give him one. I left the office and walked out into the cool autumn air of the city. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. Don't forget, Your birthday dinner is this Friday at Le Jardin, 7 p.m. Grant and Sloane have a big surprise for you. A surprise? I almost laughed. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. They had a surprise for me? No, I was the one bringing the surprise. I spent the next 2 days moving like a ghost through my own life. I engaged a private process server, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like a retired linebacker and had the demeanor of a stone wall. I gave him specific instructions. He was not to approach Grant at the apartment. He was to wait for a signal. I also contacted the legal department of the condo association for the Summit Tower. I requested a copy of the building's access logs. The logs arrived on Thursday afternoon. They showed exactly who was coming and going from Unit 40B. Grant was not just living there with Sloane. The logs showed frequent late-night entries by unauthorized guests. Loud noise complaints had been filed by the neighbors on 3 separate occasions, complaints that had been sent to the owner email address on file, which Grant had presumably routed to a junk folder or deleted before I could see them. But the most damning piece of information came from a simple credit alert I set up on my own name. On Wednesday night, an inquiry hit my credit report. Hard inquiry. Luxury automotive leasing. I stared at the notification on my laptop screen in my darkened living room. He was trying to lease a car, a Porsche, most likely, given the dealership name, and he was trying to use me as a guarantor again. He hadn't stopped with the apartment. He thought he had a blank check. He thought my silence was ignorance. He thought he had gotten away with it, so he was doubling down. This was no longer about saving face or teaching a lesson. This was financial survival. He was a parasite, and he had burrowed deep into my veins, feeding on the lifeblood of my hard work. I picked up my phone and called my father. "Hey, Dad," I said. "Sarah, looking forward to Friday?" Howard asked, his voice forcedly cheerful. "I am," I said. "Dad, I need you to promise me something." "What is it?" "Tomorrow night, no matter what happens, I need you to listen. Just listen. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to smooth it over. Just watch." "You are sounding ominous. Sarah, is everything okay?" "Everything is exactly as it should be," I said. "I just want to make sure the truth gets a seat at the table." I hung up before he could ask more questions. Friday evening arrived with a sky the color of a bruise. I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. A black dress, tailored and sharp, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back tight. I checked my purse. Inside was a manila folder. It contained the forensic report on the signature, the IP address logs, the lease agreement, the unpaid rent ledger, and the draft affidavit of forgery. I took a cab to Le Jardin. It was another one of those places my mother loved. Heavy drapes, chandeliers that cost more than a teacher's salary, and a menu that was entirely in French to intimidate the clientele. When I walked in, they were already there. They had taken the center table. Of course, my mother was wearing a sequined dress that caught every stray photon of light in the room. Grant was in a velvet blazer, looking like he owned the place. Sloane was next to him, laughing at something he had just said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. They looked like the perfect family, the successful son, the beautiful partner, the proud parents. And then there was me, the daughter who was about to walk in and light a match. I approached the table. My mother saw me first. "There she is, the birthday girl!" Linda cried out, clapping her hands. Heads turned. People smiled. It was a lovely scene. Grant stood up and gave me a hug. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Happy birthday, sis. You look intense, very CEO chic." "Thank you, Grant," I said, pulling away. "You look expensive." "Invest in yourself, right?" Winked. I sat down. The waiter poured wine. We ordered appetizers. The conversation flowed in the usual channels. Grant talked about his portfolio. Sloane talked about the new curtains she was ordering for the Penthouse. My mother nodded and beamed. "So," Grant said, leaning forward as the appetizers were cleared, "we actually have a little announcement before we get to the cake." My mother clapped her hands again. "Oh, go ahead. Grant, tell her." Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't open it. He just set it on the table. "Sloane and I," he began, his voice dropping to a reverent hush, "we are taking the next step. I am going to propose, not tonight, obviously, but soon, and since we are settling into the penthouse and things are going so well with my investments, we wanted you to be the first to know that we are planning a destination wedding in Italy next year." "Italy!" my mother gasped, acting as if she hadn't already heard this 10 times. "Oh, Grant, that is magnificent." "And Sarah," Grant said, turning his smile on me, "since you are the organized one, we were hoping you could help us with the planning, logistics, maybe help coordinate the family travel." He was asking me to be his travel agent for a wedding paid for with money he didn't have, while living in my apartment that he wasn't paying for. I looked at the velvet box. Then I looked at Grant. "That sounds expensive," I said quietly. "Quality costs money," Grant shrugged. "But hey, when you have the assets, why not enjoy them?" I reached down and picked up the manila folder I had placed by my feet. I set it on the table, right next to the velvet box. The contrast was stark. The soft, plush velvet against the hard, cold cardboard. "I have an announcement too," I said. My mother frowned. "Sarah, can't this wait? We are celebrating Grant's news." "No," I said. "It cannot wait, because my announcement is about Grant's assets." I opened the folder. The sound of the stiff paper turning was the only noise in the immediate vicinity. I pulled out the first document, the guarantor addendum with the circled signature. "Grant," I said, my voice steady and carrying easily across the table. "Do you recognize this?" He looked down. I saw the color drain from his face instantly. It wasn't a slow fade. It was a sudden, violent evacuation of blood. His eyes locked onto the signature, and I saw the moment his brain registered that the game was over. He stammered. What is this?" "It is the document you uploaded to the Blue Heron tenant portal on August 1st, I said. "The one where you forged my signature to bypass the credit check for the penthouse." Sloane looked from me to Grant, confused. "What? What is she talking about? Grant?" "It is nothing," Grant said quickly, reaching for the paper. "Sarah, put that away. This isn't the place." I slammed my hand down on the folder, pinning it to the table. The silverware rattled. The restaurant went silent. "This is exactly the place," I said, my voice rising just enough to command the room. "You wanted a penthouse lifestyle? You wanted to be a big shot? Well, big shots pay their rent, and they don't commit felonies against their own sisters." "Felony?" my father whispered. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "I am saying," I looked directly at my mother, "that your son didn't buy a penthouse. He didn't even rent it legally. He stole my identity to sign a lease he hasn't paid a dime on in 3 months, and right now, he is sitting at a table I am paying for, wearing clothes I effectively bought, lying to a woman he is dragging into a pit of debt." Grant stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You are crazy! You are lying! Mom, she is lying!" "Sit down, Grant," I said, "or I call the man waiting in the lobby to hand you an eviction notice and a court summons." He froze. He looked at the door. He looked at me. And for the first time in his life, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a cornered rat. The private dining room at Le Jardin was designed to make people feel important, with its gold leaf ceiling and heavy velvet curtains that shut out the rest of the world. My mother had rented the entire space for the evening. She had not just invited our immediate family. She had curated an audience. My aunts, uncles, and cousins from as far away as Ohio were squeezed around the long mahogany table, their faces glowing in the candlelight, eager to witness the spectacle of the Olsen family success story. I sat near the end of the table, sandwiched between my Aunt Martha, who smelled of lavender and judgment, and my cousin Greg, who was currently trying to sell me insurance between bites of his shrimp cocktail. "So, Sarah," Aunt Martha whispered loudly, "your mother tells us you are still renting that little apartment downtown. Is it safe there? A woman alone?" "It is very safe, Aunt Martha," I said, unfolding my napkin. And I own the building. She blinked, not listening. Well, at least Grant is doing well. We are all just waiting for him. He's always so busy. Grant was late. Of course he was late. It was a calculated power move he had perfected in his 20s. If you arrive on time, you are a participant. If you arrive late, you are the event. We were 30 minutes into the reservation when the double doors swung open. Grant strode in, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand raised in a gesture of apology that looked more like a papal blessing. Sloane trailed behind him, carrying a stack of gift bags that looked suspiciously like they were for herself. "Sell," Grant barked into his phone, making sure everyone could hear. "I said sell at 45. Do not wait for the dip. I want out." He tapped the screen emphatically and shoved the phone into his pocket, flashing a blinding smile at the room. "Sorry, everyone. The Tokyo markets are opening and my broker is having a panic attack. You know how it is." He did not have a broker in Tokyo. He had a gambling addiction on a sports betting app. "There he is," my mother cried out, standing up to embrace him. "The man of the hour. We were just talking about you." Grant kissed her cheek and took his seat at the head of the table, displacing my father, who quietly moved to a side chair without complaint. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Grant said, pouring himself a glass of wine from the bottle that was meant for the table. "Deal flow is insane right now, but tonight is about Sarah. Happy birthday, sis." He did not look at me. He looked at the reflection of himself in the mirror on the wall. Sloane leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. "You guys have to forgive him. He has been so stressed about the acquisition. We are finally closing on the Penthouse next week." A murmur of appreciation went through the room. My Uncle Jerry whistled. "Buying the whole thing, huh? That is a big-ticket item, Grant." "It is an asset play," Grant said, waving his hand dismissively. "Why rent when you can own? The appreciation alone is going to pay for the mortgage. It is simple math." My mother beamed. She looked around the table, making sure everyone understood the hierarchy of her children. Then, she picked up her spoon and tapped it against her champagne flute. The sharp ding-ding-ding silenced the room. "I would like to propose a toast," Linda announced. She remained seated, but her posture was rigid, regal. "To my children, to Grant, who has shown us all what is possible when you have vision and courage, who has turned a house into a palace." She paused, letting the praise settle like sugar. Then she turned her eyes toward me. They were cold, hard, and devoid of warmth. "And to Sarah," she continued, "another year older, 32, she sighed, a sound that carried more disappointment than a scream. "You know, Sarah, looking at your brother tonight, seeing what he has built, I have to ask you something, and I want you to be honest, because we are all family here." The room went deathly quiet. Greg stopped chewing his shrimp. "Do you not feel ashamed?" my mother asked. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a razor. "Ashamed?" I repeated, my voice steady. "Yes," she said. "Ashamed that at your age, you are still where you were 5 years ago. No husband, no property, just a job. Look at Grant. He is 2 years older than you, and he owns a penthouse in the sky. Does it not embarrass you to sit there and realize you have fallen so far behind?" A few cousins chuckled nervously. Aunt Martha covered her mouth to hide a smile. My father stared at the tablecloth, crumbling a bread roll into dust. Grant laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Mom, go easy on her. Not everyone has the killer instinct. Sarah is a worker bee. The world needs worker bees to serve the queens." Sloane giggled. "That is so mean, babe, but true." I looked at them. I looked at the smug satisfaction on Grant's face, the cruel victory in my mother's eyes, the pity on my relatives' faces. They thought this was the narrative. They thought this was the reality. I placed my water glass down on the table with a deliberate clink. "That is an interesting perspective, Mom," I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I simply shifted the gears of the conversation from social pleasantries to legal deposition. I turned my head and looked directly at Grant. Since we are discussing assets, Grant, I have a question about the penthouse. Grant rolled his eyes. Here we go. Jealousy raises its ugly head. No jealousy, I said. Just curiosity. You said you are closing on the unit next week. Does that mean the title transfer is ready? It is with the lawyers, Grant said, taking a sip of wine. Boilerplate stuff. You wouldn't understand the complexity. I understand complexity, I said. I handle commercial acquisitions for a living. So, just to be clear for everyone at this table, you are the owner? It is your name on the deed? Your money? 100%, Grant said, his voice loud, projecting for the back of the room. I bought it. I own it. It is my empire. That is strange, I said. What is strange? Sloane snapped. Why are you trying to ruin this? I reached down to the floor and picked up the manila folder I had brought with me. I placed it on the pristine white tablecloth. It looked like a stain. It is strange, I said, opening the folder and sliding a single piece of paper toward the center of the table. Because according to the property records of the Summit Tower, and according to the master lease agreement for Unit 40B, you are not the owner. Grant frowned. What is that? That, I said, pointing to the document, is a copy of your lease. You are a tenant, and not a very good one. That is fake, Grant said quickly, his eyes darting around the room. She forged that. She is trying to make me look bad. I do not need to forge anything to make you look bad. Grant, you are doing a fine job on your own. I pulled out the second document, the one with the rows of red numbers. This is the payment ledger for the unit. You moved in 3 months ago. You paid the security deposit, and then you stopped. I have investors handling the cash flow, Grant shouted, standing up. You don't know what you are talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, standing up to meet him. Because I did not just pull these records from a public database, I pulled them from my own files. My mother looked confused. Your files? What do you mean, your files? I turned to her. You asked if I was ashamed that I did not own property like Grant. The answer is no, because the penthouse Grant is living in, the one he says he bought, he is renting it. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. And he is renting it from me. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Aunt Martha dropped her fork. That is a lie, my mother whispered. It is not a lie, I said. I bought Unit 40B 6 months ago under Blue Heron Holdings. I am the sole proprietor of that company. I am Grant's landlord. I looked back at Grant. He was pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. And Grant, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal calm, since you just confirmed in front of 30 witnesses that you claim to own the property, and since you have not paid rent in 90 days, you are currently in default. I slid the final paper across the table. It was the eviction notice, drafted by my lawyer that morning. You owe me $25,500 in back rent, I said, and you have 3 days to pay it, or I am changing the locks. Grant stared at the paper. Sloane looked at Grant with horror. My mother looked at me as if I had just grown a second head. You, Grant stammered. You own it? I own it, I said, and I am done subsidizing your delusion. You can't do this, my mother hissed, standing up. He is your brother. This is a family dinner. No, Mom, I said, picking up my purse. You said this was a celebration of success. I am just correcting the record on who actually has it. I looked at the stunned faces of my relatives. They were not laughing anymore. They were looking at Grant with a new expression. Calculation. They were doing the math, and the numbers did not look good for the golden boy. Happy birthday to me, I said, and then I turned and walked toward the door, leaving the silence of the truth to do the rest of the work. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for car crashes or the reading of a terminal diagnosis, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of the other patrons in the main dining room, the distant jazz music. It all seemed to fade away. leaving only the sound of my brother's heavy, panicked breathing. I had turned to leave, but I did not walk out. I stood by the door, my hand resting on the brass handle, watching the tableau I had created. Grant was the first to break the paralysis. He did not apologize. He did not hang his head. Instead, he let out a jagged, hysterical laugh. Okay, he stammered, looking around the table at our wide-eyed relatives. Good one, Sarah. Really, you almost had them going. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is joking. Everyone. This is a prank. Blue Heron Holdings? That is a shell company I set up. Sarah is just messing with me because I forgot to invite her to the housewarming. He looked at Sloane, desperate for validation. Babe, you know I own it. You saw the keys. You saw the welcome packet. Sloane looked at him, then at me. The doubt was creeping into her eyes like ink in water. She was shallow, but she was not stupid. She knew the difference between a prank and an ambush. Grant? Sloane said, her voice trembling. Why does she have a ledger? It is fake, Grant shouted, slamming his hand on the table. She printed it off some template online. She is jealous. Sloane, I told you she was jealous. I let go of the door handle and walked back toward the table. The sound of my heels on the parquet floor was rhythmic, deliberate, like the ticking of a clock. It is not a template, Grant, I said, stopping right behind his chair. And Blue Heron Holdings is not yours. It is a limited liability company registered in the state of Delaware. The sole signatory is Sarah Elizabeth Olson. Do you want me to pull up the Secretary of State's website right now? We can project it onto the wall if you like. Grant spun around in his chair to face me. His face was a mask of sweat and fury. Why are you doing this? He hissed. Why are you trying to humiliate me? I am not humiliating you, I replied calmly. I am evicting you. My mother finally found her voice. She stood up. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She did not look at Grant. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing with a familiar, toxic accusation. Sarah, she snapped, this is enough. Even if what you say is true, why on earth would you keep it a secret? Why would you let your brother make a fool of himself? You sat there for months and said nothing. You let us believe he bought it. I stared at her, genuinely marveling at her mental gymnastics. I let you believe it? Mom, you never asked. Not once. You were so busy crowning him the king of real estate that you never bothered to check if he actually owned the kingdom. You wanted the lie more than you wanted the truth. You tricked us, she accused, her voice rising to a shriek. You set a trap. I bought an investment property, I corrected her. Grant applied to rent it through a blind management system. I did not solicit him. He came to my company. He signed the lease. He agreed to the terms. The only person tricking anyone here is the man sitting in that chair who has not paid his rent since August. He would have paid, my mother insisted, grasping at straws. He is good for it. He is your brother. You should have given him a grace period. You should have come to us privately. Not done this. She gestured wildly at the silent, horrified audience of aunts and uncles. I tried to talk to him, I said. 3 notices were sent. He ignored them all. I never got them, Grant lied, his eyes darting around. The mail system in that building is garbage. They were emailed, Grant, I said, to the address you are using to trade your fake crypto coins. Grant stood up abruptly. He looked small now. The velvet blazer looked like a costume. He reached out, grabbing my arm just above the elbow. His grip was tight, desperate. Sarah, he whispered, his voice cracking. Can we talk? Outside? Just for a minute. Please, let's fix this. Don't do this here. I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked into his eyes. I saw the fear there. He wasn't afraid of losing the apartment. He was afraid of losing the audience. He was afraid that Sloane was about to walk, that Uncle Jerry wasn't going to invest in his next scheme, that the facade was dissolving. No, I said, pulling my arm away sharply. We are done talking in private. Private is where you lie. Grant, We are doing this in public." "Please," he begged, his voice dropping so low only the immediate family could hear. "I will pay you. I swear. I have a deal closing on Tuesday. I will write you a check for the full amount. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we are partners." "Partners?" I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "We are not partners. Grant, we are not even co-signers." I reached into the folder again. This was it. The moment I had debated with myself for 3 nights, the nuclear option. "Actually," I said, "speaking of co-signers, there is one more thing the family needs to see." I pulled out the last document, the forensic analysis of the guarantor addendum. "What is that?" my father asked. He spoke for the first time since the chaos began. He looked gray, like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Grant couldn't qualify for the Penthouse on his own," I explained, addressing my father but keeping my eyes on Grant. "His credit score is too low. The building requires a guarantor, someone to co-sign and take responsibility if he doesn't pay." "So?" my mother said, wiping her eyes. "So you co-signed for him? Is that it? Then why are you complaining? That is what family does." "I didn't co-sign for him, Mom," I said. I held up the paper. It showed the blown-up image of the signature, the digital tracing marks, the timestamp of the upload. "I didn't sign this document," I said clearly, "but my name is on it." The room went from silent to breathless. "What are you saying?" my father whispered. "I am saying that on August 1st, Grant logged into the tenant portal and uploaded a document with a forged signature." I said, "He traced my signature from an old check or a birthday card. He used my name, my credit history, and my reputation to defraud the leasing company, which, in a twist of irony he never saw coming, turned out to be me." I slammed the paper down on the table in front of my mother. "Look at it. Mom," I demanded. "Look at what your golden boy did. That is not just a lie. That is a felony. It is identity theft. It is wire fraud. It is forgery in the 2nd degree." My mother looked down at the paper. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't have picked it up if she tried. She stared at the signature, my signature, scrawled by her son's hand. Grant collapsed back into his chair. He didn't deny it this time. He couldn't. The evidence was technical, precise, and irrefutable. He buried his face in his hands. "Oh my God," Sloane whispered. She stood up slowly, backing away from the table as if Grant were radioactive. You committed fraud?" "Sloane, wait," Grant mumbled through his hands. "It is not like that. I was going to tell her. I was just borrowing her credit. It is victimless." "Victimless?" I countered. "You are 90 days past due. If I were any other landlord, I would have reported this to the credit bureaus last month. My credit score, the one I worked 10 years to build, would be tanking right now because of you. I would be liable for your debt." "But you are the landlord," Grant shouted, looking up with tear-filled, angry eyes. "So it doesn't matter. You can't sue yourself. It is all internal. Who cares?" "The bank cares," I said coldly. "The IRS cares. My compliance officer cares. You put my license at risk. Grant, you put my entire career in jeopardy to play house in a condo you couldn't afford." My mother looked up. The color had drained from her face completely. She looked at Grant, then at the paper, then at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not embarrassment, fear. She realized this wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was police territory. "Sarah," she whispered, you wouldn't—" "Wouldn't what?" I asked. "You wouldn't report him," she pleaded. "He is your brother. He could go to jail." "He should have thought about that before he traced my name," I said. "He made a mistake," she cried out. "He was desperate. He wanted to make us proud." "He wanted to show off," I corrected. "There is a difference." I looked around the table. My Aunt Martha was staring at Grant with open disgust. Uncle Jerry was checking his phone, probably deleting Grant's number. The audience he had cultivated was gone. I turned back to Grant. "Here is how this is going to work," I said, my voice cutting through my mother's quiet sobbing. I am giving you a choice, and because I am generous, far more generous than you deserve, I am giving you a way out that doesn't involve handcuffs tonight. Grant looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You have 24 hours, I said. By 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, I want the apartment vacated, completely. I want the keys on the counter. I want your clothes, your furniture, and your ego out of my property. 24 hours, Grant protested. That is impossible. I have nowhere to go. You have a car, I said. Or maybe you can stay with one of the investors you're always talking about. I don't care. But if you are not out by 7 tomorrow, I am filing the affidavit of forgery with the district attorney, and I am filing the eviction suit for the back rent. I looked at Sloan. And if I were you, Sloan, I would check your own credit report. If he did it to his sister, he definitely did it to his girlfriend. Sloan gasped, clutching her purse to her chest. She looked at Grant with pure horror, then turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance. Sloan, Grant called out, but he didn't chase her. He knew it was over. 24 hours, Grant, I repeated. And Mom? If you want to pay his back rent to keep me from suing him for the money, you are welcome to write a check. It is $25,500. I take cashier's checks only. I didn't wait for an answer. There was nothing left to say. The cake had not been served. The champagne was warm, and the family myth was dead. I turned and walked out of the private dining room, through the heavy velvet curtains, and into the cool, indifferent air of the main restaurant. Behind me, I heard my mother start to wail, a high, thin sound of a woman mourning a son who was still sitting right in front of her. I walked out into the night, hailed a cab, and for the first time in years, I breathed easily. The weight was gone. I hadn't just evicted a tenant. I had evicted a lifetime of being second best. The fallout from the dinner at Le Jardin was immediate, violent, and entirely digital. I had barely stepped into my apartment and locked the door before my phone began to vibrate against the entryway table. It did not stop. It buzzed incessantly, a frantic Morse code of panic and rage moving across the screen. I did not answer. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and sat down at my laptop. The time for conversation was over. We were now in the discovery phase of litigation, even if they did not realize it yet. The first wave came from my mother. Her initial strategy was tears. She left 3 voicemails in quick succession. In the first, she was sobbing, asking how I could be so cruel to my own flesh and blood on my birthday. In the second, the tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. She accused me of planning this ambush for months, of being a snake in the grass who waited for the moment of maximum humiliation. You are not the daughter I raised. Her voice crackled through the speaker. We cover for each other in this family. We do not destroy each other. You need to fix this. Sarah, call him. Apologize. Tell him he can stay until the new year. Do not make me choose between you, because you will not like the choice I make. I saved the voicemail. It was not sentimental. It was evidence of coercion. Should I ever need a restraining order? Then came Grant. His approach was a masterclass in narcissistic manipulation. He did not call. He texted. He knew that voice calls left no record he could edit later, but texts allowed him to craft a narrative. I can't believe you did that. His first message read, Mom is devastated. Dad is having chest pains. Hope you are happy. I ignored it. I was going to pay you back. The next one said, 5 minutes later, I had a liquidity event scheduled for Tuesday. You just cost me a major deal because now I have to scramble for housing. You literally sabotaged my career. It was classic Grant. He was already rewriting history. In his mind, he wasn't a squatter who had forged a signature. He was a misunderstood tycoon whose sister had ruined his business deal. Sloan left. He texted an hour later. She took the car keys. She is staying at a hotel. You destroyed my relationship. I hope that money is worth being alone forever. I stared at the screen. The accusation stung, but only for a second. Then the logic took over. I hadn't destroyed his relationship. The truth had, if his relationship was built on the premise that he owned a penthouse he was renting and had money he didn't possess, it was never a relationship. It was a long con. My father called at midnight. I picked up for him. Sarah. He sounded exhausted, his voice thin and reedy. Please. I can't do it, Dad, I said before he could even make the ask. He has nowhere to go, Howard said. It is cold. He has a lot of things there. Furniture, clothes. Can't you just give him 30 days? Legally. Don't you have to give 30 days? Legally, I said, my voice crisp. I have to give 30 days for a tenant who pays rent or violates a minor lease term. For a tenant who committed criminal fraud to secure the lease, I can evict for cause immediately. And since he isn't actually the legal tenant because the lease is void due to the forgery, he is technically a trespasser. Don't use those words, my father whispered. Criminal, trespasser. He is your brother. He made himself a criminal when he traced my signature. Dad, I didn't do that. He did. Just give him the weekend, Howard pleaded. Let him move out Sunday. Give him time to find a storage unit. The deadline is 7 o'clock tomorrow night, I said. If he is not out, the police go in. That is final. I hung up and turned off my phone. I did not sleep well, but I woke up with a clarity that felt like ice water. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and drafted the only communication I intended to send to the opposing party. I opened my email client and composed a message to Grant, copying my personal attorney and the general inbox for Blue Heron Holdings. Subject: Notice to vacate. Demand for possession. Unit 40B. Mr. Olson. Reference is made to the lease agreement dated August 1st for the property located at the Summit Tower. Unit 40B. As demonstrated yesterday, this lease was secured through fraudulent means, specifically the forgery of a guarantor addendum. Furthermore, the account is in arrears in the amount of $25,500. This email serves as formal notice that your occupancy is terminated effective immediately. You have until 7 post-meridiem today, Saturday, November 15th, to vacate the premises. Vacating includes the removal of all personal property and the return of all keys and access fobs to the concierge desk. Failure to comply will result in the immediate filing of an affidavit of forgery with the district attorney's office and a civil suit for the recovery of all back rent and legal fees. Do not contact me personally regarding this matter. All further communication must be directed to my legal counsel, Mr. Henderson. Govern yourself accordingly. Sarah E. Olson. I hit send. It was done. There was no emotion in it, no anger, no family baggage. It was a business transaction. 2 hours later, my work phone rang. It was Saturday, so a call on my work line was unusual. I checked the caller ID. It was the managing partner of Caldwell Meridian, Robert Sterling. My stomach dropped. Robert never called on weekends unless a building was burning down or the SEC was raiding the lobby. Hello, Robert, I answered, keeping my voice steady. Sarah, Robert said. His tone was not angry, but it was perplexed. I just received a very strange email to the general partner inbox, and I wanted to run it by you before I had legal shred it. I closed my eyes. Grant. I am listening, I said. It is from a Grant Olson, Robert said. Claims to be your brother? He sent a rather rambling missive accusing you of, well, it is hard to parse, but he claims you leveraged insider information to steal a real estate deal from him, and that you are using company resources to harass and intimidate a private investor. He threatened to go to the press if we didn't sanction you. The silence on the line stretched for a moment. Robert, I said, I am mortified. Grant is indeed my brother. He is currently being evicted from a property I personally own for non-payment of rent and forgery. He is lashing out. Forgery? Robert asked. His interest piqued. He forged my name on a lease guarantor form, I said. I have the forensic report. I can forward it to you if you need to clear me with compliance. Robert chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound. That won't be necessary. Sarah, you are one of my best asset managers. I know a desperate shakedown when I see one. The email was full of spelling errors and sent from a Gmail account, hardly the mark of a private investor. I apologize for the disturbance, I said. Don't be, Robert said. But Sarah? If he contacts the firm again, we will issue a cease and desist. We protect our own, and he sounds like a liability. He is, I agreed. He is a distressed asset. Liquidate him, Robert advised. Have a good weekend. The line went dead. Grant had tried to nuke my career. He had tried to hit me in the one place he knew I cared about, the one place where I had built an identity separate from the family, and he had failed. In fact, he had done the opposite. By trying to drag my boss into it, he had exposed his own instability to the very people he tried to impress. He had confirmed everything I said about him. Around 2 p.m, my phone chimed with a text message. It was not from family. It was from Sloan. It was a screenshot of a credit report. He opened 3 credit cards in my name. Sloan wrote underneath the image, 3? I didn't even know I had an Amex. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was brief. Sloan had been happy to drink the champagne when she thought it was free. Report it. I texted back. Fraud alert. Police report. Do not let him talk you out of it. I already did, she replied. I left him. I am at my sister's. I just wanted you to know. You were right. He is sick. He is broke, I corrected. Being sick implies he can't help it. He made choices. I am sorry about the dinner, Sloan added. I really thought he bought it. I know, I typed. Goodbye, Sloan. I blocked her number. I didn't need updates. I didn't need allies. I needed the clock to hit 7. The hours ticked by. I sat in my living room, watching the sun dip lower over the skyline. I imagined the scene at the Penthouse, the frantic packing, the screaming, my mother probably trying to help him box up his fake life, blaming me for every strip of packing tape. At 6:30, Mr. Henderson called me. He was my process server and, for today, my on-site representative. I am in the lobby of the summit, Henderson rumbled. Moving truck is out front. Looks like a chaotic scene. Is he leaving? I asked. He is, Henderson said, but he is not happy. He is making a scene in the loading dock, yelling at the movers, blaming the economy. He tried to take the custom curtains. The curtains belong to the unit, I said. Stop him. Already did? Henderson said with a hint of satisfaction. Concierge stepped in. They have the itemized inventory list you sent over. Good. There is a woman with him, Henderson added. Older, crying. My mother. She had come to help him retreat. She was facilitating his exit, just as she had facilitated his entrance. Let them go, I said. Just make sure the keys are handed over. At 7:15, Henderson called back. Unit is clear, he said. Keys are in my hand. He left a mess, garbage bags, some broken glass in the kitchen, but he is out. Access fobs deactivated. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. One more thing, the large man said. He left a note, taped to the fridge. Read it, I said. Henderson cleared his throat. You won the battle, Sarah, but you lost your family. Don't expect an invite for Christmas. I will be back on top soon, and you will regret this. I looked around my quiet, clean, paid-for apartment. I looked at the files on my desk, the work I had done, the life I had built brick by honest brick. Trash it, I said. Consider it done, Henderson said. Do you want me to bring the keys to you? No, I said. Leave them with the concierge. I will pick them up on Monday. I have a birthday to celebrate. I hung up the phone. The apartment was silent. The war was over. I had lost a brother I never really had, and parents who only loved the version of me that served them. But as I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights, I realized I hadn't lost my family. I had just finally evicted the strangers who had been living in my head. But I knew Grant. The note was not just a tantrum. It was a promise. He wouldn't disappear. He would pivot, and I had to be ready for the final act. Because people like Grant Olson didn't learn lessons. They just found new victims. The silence that followed the eviction was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a gathered storm. For 3 days, my phone did not ring. My parents did not call to yell, to beg, or to guilt-trip me. That terrified me more than the screaming. The screaming I could handle. I had a lifetime of practice tuning out my mother's histrionics. But this silence suggested strategy. It suggested that they were regrouping, digging trenches, and preparing for a war that I thought I had already won. I spent those 3 days doing what I did best. I audited the situation. I knew my brother was a financial black hole. That was established fact. But what I could not understand was my mother's absolute, terrifying desperation. It went beyond maternal blindness. A mother protects her child. Yes, but Linda Olson had defended Grant with the ferocity of a cornered animal. She had watched him humiliate me, steal from me, and lie to the world, and she had applauded him. Why? Why was Grant so indispensable that she was willing to sacrifice her relationship with her competent, solvent daughter to protect her incompetent, fraudulent son? I found the answer on a Tuesday night, buried in the public records of the Beacon Heights County Clerk's office. I was looking for anything that might link Grant's previous business ventures to my parents. I searched for Grant Olson. Nothing. He never put anything in his own name if he could help it. Then I searched for Linda Olson. The screen populated with a list of filings. Most were standard. The deed to their house, the mortgage from 20 years ago. But the last 3 entries made my blood run cold. Item 1. A home equity line of credit taken out against my parents' house 3 years ago. The amount was $150,000. Item 2. A judgment lien filed against Linda Olson as a co-signer for a defaulted business loan. The business name was Joe Ventures, LLC, Grant's failed import-export scheme. Item 3. A second mortgage taken out 6 months ago, just before Grant moved into the penthouse. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the horror on my face. My mother was not just enabling Grant, she was financing him, and she was not doing it with cash on hand. She was cannibalizing her own future. She had stripped the equity out of the house she and my father had lived in for 30 years to fund Grant's delusions of grandeur. The $150,000? That was likely gone. The second mortgage? That was probably what Grant was living on before he decided to stop paying rent. Suddenly, everything made sense. The desperation, the refusal to hear the truth, the insistence that Grant was successful. If Grant failed, he didn't just look bad. If Grant failed, my parents lost their house. My mother had leveraged her retirement, her security, and her home on the bet that Grant would eventually strike it rich and pay it all back. She literally could not afford for him to be a failure. His success was the only thing standing between her and financial ruin. I needed to speak to my father. I called him the next morning. I did not give him a choice. "Meet me at the diner on 4th Street, I said. 10 o'clock, alone. If you bring Mom, I leave." He was sitting in a booth when I arrived, nursing a black coffee. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, and the lines around his mouth were deep trenches of worry. He didn't look up when I slid into the seat across from him. "You know, don't you?" I asked. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Howard sighed, a long, rattling sound. "I know a lot of things, Sarah. I am talking about the house, Dad, the HELOC, the second mortgage, the liens." He flinched. "You went digging." "I did due diligence," I corrected. "Something I wish you had done 3 years ago." "I didn't sign them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The house. The deed is in both our names, but she forged my signature on the power of attorney to get the line of credit, or maybe Grant did it for her. I don't know anymore." I stared at him. "She forged your signature? And you stayed?" "She is my wife. Sarah. She was convinced. Grant convinced her that he just needed seed money. He promised he would double it in 6 months. He showed her charts, graphs. He is very convincing. He is a con artist, Dad." "He is our son," Howard said, looking up at me with watery eyes. "And now, Now we are in too deep. If he declares bankruptcy, they come after the house. Your mother thinks if we just keep him afloat long enough, he will land one of these deals and fix it all. That is the gambler's fallacy, I said brutally. You are throwing good money after bad. He is never going to pay you back. He is incapable of generating legitimate revenue. I know, Howard whispered. I think I have known for a year, but your mother, she can't accept it. If she accepts it, she has to admit she lost our home. So instead, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage, you let him prey on me. You sat at that table. Dad, you sat there and ate steak while they laughed at me. You knew Grant was a leech. You knew he was bleeding you dry. But you were hoping he could bleed me dry too, just to take the pressure off you for a few months. Howard flinched as if I had slapped him. No, Sarah, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. You threw me to the wolves to save your own skin. You hoped I would pay his rent, maybe invest in his schemes, just to keep the house of cards standing a little longer. He didn't deny it, he just stared into his coffee cup. I am done, Dad, I said, standing up. I am done being the collateral damage in this family's financial suicide pact. I am not giving him money. I am not dropping the eviction suit, and I am certainly not paying off your mortgage. We could lose everything, Howard said. You already lost it, I said. You just haven't moved out yet. I left him there. I had to. If I stayed, I would have started screaming, and I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. That evening, the silence from my mother finally broke. She didn't call. She showed up. I saw her on the camera monitor of my building's lobby. She was wearing sunglasses, even though it was 7 p.m. and dark out. I buzzed her in. She walked into my apartment and didn't even look around. She looked frantic. Her hair was slightly askew, and her lipstick was applied with a trembling hand. You have to stop the lawsuit, she said. No hello, no preamble. I can't stop the lawsuit. Mom, it is filed. You can withdraw it, she insisted, pacing my living room floor. You can tell the lawyers it was a mistake. Tell them you gave him permission. Tell them anything. Why? I asked, leaning against my kitchen island. Why should I perjure myself for him? Because if you sue him for $25,000, he will have a judgment on his record, she cried. He won't be able to get a loan. He won't be able to start his new company. Good, I said. The world needs fewer companies run by Grant. You don't understand, she screamed. He needs to borrow money to pay us back. If his credit is ruined, we lose the house. You are going to lose the house anyway, Mom. She froze. She looked at me, and I saw the mask slip. The arrogant matriarch was gone. In her place was a terrified woman who knew she had made a catastrophic mistake. You know, she whispered. I saw the liens, I said. I saw the second mortgage. How much does he owe you? 300,000? 400? She slumped onto my sofa, burying her face in her hands. He promised. He said the crypto deal was a sure thing. He said the import business just had a supply chain issue. He lied, I said gently. He always lies. I can't lose my house, Sarah, she sobbed. It is all we have. You have money. You are rich. You have this company. Can't you just help us? Just this once? Pay off the second mortgage. We will pay you back. I promise. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had humiliated me at dinner 4 days ago, the woman who had asked if I was ashamed of my life. Now she was asking me to use the fruits of that shameful life to bail her out of a hole she dug with a golden shovel. No, I said. She looked up, shocked. What? I said no. I am not paying off Grant's debts. I am not paying off your gambling debts. I am your mother. And he is your son, I said. You chose him. You bet on him. You put every chip you had on Grant. You don't get to cash out with my chips now that the wheel came up 0. You are heartless, she spat, the anger returning as a defense mechanism. You want to see us on the street. I want you to face reality, I said. Sell the house. Mom, sell it now before the bank takes it. Downsize. Rent a condo, salvage what you can of your pension, but cut him off." "I can't," she whispered. "He is my boy." "Then you will drown with him," I said, "but I will be watching from the shore." She left in a rage, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. The next day, the smear campaign began. Grant couldn't attack me legally, so he attacked me socially. He posted a long, rambling screed on Facebook. He didn't mention the forgery or the rent. Instead, he claimed that I had manipulated family trust to steal a real estate deal out from under him. He claimed he had found the penthouse, negotiated the price, and that I had used my corporate connections to swoop in and buy it cash, forcing him to become a tenant in a home he discovered. My own sister. He wrote, "She cares more about profit margins than blood. She threw me out on the street because I was a few days late on rent due to a banking error. This is what corporate greed looks like." It was a good story. It played into the narrative of the heartless banker versus the struggling entrepreneur. But Grant had made a fatal error. He forgot about the audience at the dinner. My phone beeped. It was a text from Aunt Martha. "Sarah, I saw Grant's post. Is it true?" I didn't reply. I simply sent her a screenshot of the forensic report of the forged signature. 3 minutes later, Aunt Martha replied, "Oh my heavens, he traced it?" Then came a text from Cousin Greg. "Hey Sarah, Grant hit me up for $5,000 today. Said you froze his assets. Is he good for it?" I replied, "He is facing criminal charges for identity theft. Invest at your own risk." Greg replied, "Yikes, thanks for the heads up." The narrative was crumbling. Grant thought he could isolate me, but he had underestimated the power of the truth. When you build a reputation on being rich and successful, the moment you ask for a loan, the illusion shatters. Grant was panicked. I could feel it. He was burning bridges faster than he could build them. He was calling everyone, college friends, distant relatives, former dates, trying to scrape together enough cash to maintain the facade. But I wasn't done. I had one more loose end to tie up. I received an email from my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, on Friday morning. "Sarah, regarding the eviction suit, Grant has filed a countermotion. He is claiming squatters' rights. He says he had a verbal agreement with you for indefinite occupancy in exchange for property management services. He is trying to drag this out in housing court." I laughed out loud in my office. Property management services? He had left garbage bags in the hallway and broken a wine glass in the dishwasher. "He wants a fight?" I typed back. "Okay, let's give him a war." I opened my safe. Inside was the one document I had held back. It wasn't about the penthouse. It was about the car. When I had seen the hard inquiry from the Porsche dealership on my credit report, I had called them immediately. I hadn't just blocked the transaction. I had asked them to send me the application. They had faxed it over. It was a lease application for a Porsche Cayenne. The applicant was Grant Olson. The co-signer was Sarah Olson. And there, in the reference section, Grant had listed a phone number for his employer. I recognized the number. It was my father's cell phone. Grant had been using my father to verify his employment for years. Dad had been lying to banks, to car dealerships, to landlords, confirming that Grant was a consultant, making 6 figures. That made my father an accomplice to wire fraud. This was the leverage. This was the nuclear button. I didn't want to destroy my father, but if Grant was going to lie in court about a verbal agreement, I needed to show the judge a pattern of behavior. I needed to show that lying was the family business. I picked up the phone and called Grant. He answered on the first ring. "Ready to settle?" he asked, his voice smug. "My lawyer says you can't kick me out without a hearing. That could take 6 months. Sarah, I can live in a hotel on your dime for a long time." "I am looking at the Porsche application, Grant," I said. The line went dead silent. "I see Dad's phone number listed as your employer," I continued. "I wonder what would happen if I subpoenaed Dad's phone records. Or better yet, if I called the dealership and told them that the employment verification was fraudulent? That would make Dad a co-conspirator. Do you think Dad would survive a federal fraud investigation? He looks pretty frail these days." "You leave him out of this," Grant hissed. "You brought him into it," I said. You used him as a shield. Now I am using him as a weapon." "What do you want?" Grant asked. His voice was no longer smug. It was defeated. "Drop the counter motion," I said. "Admit to the debt in writing and sign a confession of judgment for the full $25,000. If you do that, I won't turn the Porsche application over to the police. I won't send Dad to prison." "You would send your own father to jail?" "I would protect my name," I said. "The choice is yours. You have 1 hour." I hung up. I sat there, watching the clock. I felt a strange emptiness. It wasn't triumph. It was the cold, hollow feeling of cutting off a limb to save the body. I was severing the last tie. 50 minutes later, my email pinged. It was a PDF from Grant's lawyer. Notice of withdrawal of counter-motion. Confession of judgment. It was signed. He had folded. He had sacrificed his pride to save his father, or more likely, to save himself from the guilt of being the one who finally broke the old man. I printed the document. It was over. The legal battle was won. But as I looked at the signature, Grant's real signature this time, shaky and jagged, I knew the story wasn't quite finished. Grant was cornered, broke, and exposed. And a man like that didn't just fade away. He exploded. I had the judgment. Now I had to collect. And I had a feeling the final payment wasn't going to be in cash. It was going to be in truth. The kind of truth that burns everything down to the ground. The air in Beacon Heights felt different that Thursday. It was not the crisp autumn breeze I was used to. It was stagnant, charged with the kind of static electricity that precedes a lightning strike. I had won the legal battle, but as I sat in my office watching the sun go down over the skyline, I knew the war was far from over. A wounded animal does not just curl up and die. It lashes out. And Grant was wounded. The first strike came at 6 p.m. It was clumsy, desperate, and theatrical. I received a call from Detective Miller of the Beacon Heights Police Department. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. "Ms. Olson," the detective said, "we have received a complaint filed by a Mr. Grant Olson regarding a property theft at the Summit Tower." I swiveled my chair around to face the window. "Theft? That is interesting, considering he does not live there anymore. He claims that during his eviction process, items of significant value were withheld or stolen by the landlord. Specifically, a vintage Rolex watch valued at $15,000 and a collection of rare coins. He alleges you, as the landlord, entered the premises before he had fully vacated." I almost laughed. It was so predictable. He was trying to flip the narrative. If he could paint me as a thief, he could leverage it to drop the debt judgment. He was trying to create a crime scene where there was only a contract dispute. "Detective," I said, opening a file on my computer, "I anticipated this. That is why I had a third-party process server. Mr. Henderson, video record the entire eviction process. I have a continuous, time-stamped 4K video file showing the condition of the apartment from the moment Mr. Olson walked out the door. It shows an empty counter. No watch, no coins, just trash." There was a pause on the line. "You have video?" "I do," I said. "And I have a signed inventory list from the concierge. I can email both to you within 5 minutes. I would also like to remind you that filing a false police report is a crime, Detective." "Send the video," Miller said, his tone shifting from suspicion to exhaustion. "If the video shows the unit was clear, we will close the file." I sent the email. Grant's trap had snapped shut on his own fingers. He thought it was his word against mine. He forgot that in my world, we do not operate on words. We operate on documentation. But that was just the opening act. The real danger was not Grant. It was the people he had dragged down with him. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a number I had blocked, but this was a voice message left via a third-party app. It was Sloan. "Sarah, please," her voice sounded tinny and frightened. "Do not hang up. I am not with him anymore. I am at my sister's place in Jersey. I saw the legal papers you sent Grant. I saw my name listed as a potential co-conspirator." I listened. I did not delete it. "I can't have a record. Sarah, she continued, her voice breaking. I work in pharmaceutical sales. If I have a fraud charge, I lose my license. I lose everything. I know you're angry, but I swear, I didn't know he forged the signature until that dinner. Please, is there any way we can make a deal? I picked up the phone and called her back. She answered on the first ring. I am listening, I said. Thank God, she breathed. Sarah, I will do anything. Just take my name off the lawsuit. I need the truth. Sloan, I said. Not the version you tell your friends, the real version. Grant is claiming in his counter-narrative that he had money, that he was just temporarily illiquid, and that I tricked him. I need proof that this was a premeditated con. I have it, she said instantly. I have his texts. Which texts? From July, she said. Before we moved in, he texted me about the lease. He bragged about it. Send them, I said. If they are what you say they are, I will drop you from the civil suit. But you have to testify if this goes to trial. Done, she said. 2 minutes later, my phone pinged with a series of screenshots. I opened the first one. It was dated July 28th. Grant. Just uploaded the docs. Used the old trick with the sister's signature. System didn't even blink. We are in, baby. Sloan. Is that safe? What if she checks? Grant. She never checks. Sarah is a robot. She just pays bills and dies inside. By the time she notices, I will have flipped the crypto deal and bought the place for real. She is basically my bank. She just doesn't know it yet. I stared at the screen. Sarah is a robot. She is basically my bank. It was the smoking gun. It was the admission of intent, the malice, the premeditation. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had viewed me as a resource to be exploited, a non-person whose only purpose was to fund his fantasy. Thank you. Sloan, I texted back. You are clear. I saved the images to 3 different cloud servers. Then, the final invitation arrived. It was 10 o'clock at night. My mother called. Her voice was unrecognizable, hollow, flat, drained of all the fight she had shown earlier in the week. Sarah, she said, come over, please. Why? I asked. We need to end this, she said. Your father, he is not doing well. The stress. Grant is here. We are all here. We want to make peace. Please, just come for coffee. No lawyers, no yelling, just family. It sounded like a surrender, but I knew better. It was an ambush, or maybe it was a wake. Either way, I had to see it. I had to look them in the eye one last time before I severed the cord forever. I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. But Mom, if Grant lies to me one more time, I am walking out, and the next person you see will be a sheriff. I drove to the house I grew up in. The suburbs of Beacon Heights were dark, the streetlights casting long, skeletal shadows on the lawns. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling slightly on the porch columns, a detail I had missed before, or perhaps ignored. It was a house crumbling under the weight of debt. I walked inside. They were sitting in the living room. My father was in his armchair, looking pale and ghostly. My mother sat on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. And Grant was pacing. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn days ago. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who had not slept in 72 hours. When I walked in, Grant stopped pacing. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. You came, my mother said softly. I came, I said, remaining standing near the doorway. I kept my purse over my shoulder. I wasn't staying. You said you wanted to make peace. We do, my father said, his voice trembling. Sarah, this has gone too far. Police reports? Evictions? We are destroying ourselves. I am not destroying anything, I said. I am cleaning up a mess. I didn't steal the watch, Grant shouted suddenly, his voice cracking. You hid it. You wanted to frame me. Grant, stop, my mother said, but she didn't sound convinced. She looked at me with pleading eyes. Sarah, he is upset. He lost his home. He lost my house, I corrected. Look, Grant said, stepping toward me. He held his hands out, palms up, in a gesture that was meant to be conciliatory but looked manic. Let's just reset, okay? I will sign whatever you want. I will pay you back eventually. But you have to retract the statement to the credit bureau. You have to tell the car dealership it was a misunderstanding. I can't function like this. You have frozen my entire life. You froze your own life when you decided to be a fraud, I said. I am not a fraud, he screamed, the mask slipping completely. I am an entrepreneur. I take risks. You wouldn't understand. Sitting in your little office with your guaranteed paycheck, I was trying to build something for all of us. By stealing from me? I asked. By calling me a robot? By telling your girlfriend I was just a bank? Grant froze. His face went white. I never said that. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and held it up. The screenshot of his text to Sloane glowed in the dim light of the living room. July 28th, I read aloud. Sarah is a robot. She is basically my bank. She just doesn't know it yet. My mother let out a gasp. My father closed his eyes and turned his head away. Sloane sent you that? Grant whispered. The betrayal in his voice was palpable, which was ironic given the circumstances. She did, I said, because she didn't want to go to jail for you. Nobody wants to go to jail for you, Grant, not Sloane, not Dad. I looked at my father. Dad, tell him about the Porsche application. Howard didn't speak. He just shook his head. Tell him, I demanded. She knows, Grant, Howard whispered. She knows I verified your employment. She knows it is a lie. Grant looked at our father, then back at me. He realized the walls were not just closing in. They had already crushed him. You ruined everything, Grant hissed. He lunged toward me, not to hit me, but to grab the phone. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I simply held my ground. Touch me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And you spend tonight in a cell. Try it. He stopped inches from my face. He was breathing hard, smelling of stale sweat and desperation. He was shaking. I hate you, he whispered. I have always hated you. You think you are better than us because you have money? You are nothing. You are alone. I would rather be alone with the truth, I said, than surrounded by people who only love me for what they can steal. I turned to my mother. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Here is the choice, I said. The peace you wanted. You can have the lie. Mom, you can keep believing he is a victim. You can keep enabling him until he takes the house, the pension, and everything you have left, or you can have the truth. You can admit that you raised a criminal and that you helped him. Sarah, please, she sobbed. No more please, I said. Tomorrow is the end. I am going to the bank tomorrow morning. I am going to the district attorney. I am submitting the text messages, the video of the apartment, and the Porsche application. You can't, Grant said. You will destroy the family. The family is already dead, I said. I am just signing the death certificate. I turned around and walked to the door. Sarah, my father called out. Don't do it. Please. He is your brother. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at them. A tableau of misery. My mother weeping. My father broken. My brother seething with impotent rage. He stopped being my brother the day he decided I was just a signature, I said. I walked out into the night. The air was cold, biting. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the final cut. I knew what I had to do. There was no going back. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought they could guilt me into submission one last time, but they had forgotten who I was. I wasn't the jealous sister. I wasn't the robot. I was the owner, and tomorrow, I was closing the account. The following morning, the sun rose over Beacon Heights with a blinding clarity, burning away the mist that usually clung to the river. It was Friday. I had promised that today would be the end, and I was a woman of my word. I did not go to the bank immediately. Instead, I drove to my parents' house at 8 o'clock in the morning. I carried with me a box of pastries from a bakery my mother loved and a briefcase containing the sum total of my brother's destruction. I did not knock. I used my key. They were in the kitchen. It was a scene of domestic devastation. My mother was in her bathrobe, staring into a mug of cold tea. My father was reading the newspaper, though he had not turned a page in 10 minutes. Grant was slumped at the table, wearing a hoodie, looking like a teenager who had been grounded, not a 34-year-old man who had committed grand larceny. "Sarah," my mother said, looking up. Her eyes were swollen. "What are you doing here? You said you were going to the police." "I am," I said, placing the pastry box on the table. It was a surreal gesture, a ghost of the dutiful daughter I used to be. "But before I go to the precinct, we are going to have breakfast, and we are going to finish the conversation we started last night. But this time, I am asking the questions." I sat down at the head of the table. Usually, this was my father's seat. Today, he moved to the side without a word. "Grant," I started, my voice conversational, almost pleasant. "I did some math last night. I looked at the rent you owe me, $25,500. Then I looked at the lifestyle you have been leading, the dinners at Le Jardin, the tailored suits, the lease payments on a Porsche you do not have yet, the vacations to Cabo." Grant glared at me, his jaw tight. "So, I spend money. I am an investor." "You are unemployed," I corrected him, "and you have been unemployed for 2 years since your import business collapsed. So, the question that kept me up last night was not why you stole from me. It was how you survived this long before you started stealing from me." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the property records I had found earlier in the week, the ones showing the liens against this very house. "Mom," I said, sliding the papers across the table, "do you want to tell him, or should I?" My mother flinched as if I had thrown boiling water at her. She reached out and covered the papers with her hand, trying to hide them from Grant, or perhaps from herself. "Tell me what?" Grant asked, sitting up straighter. "What is that?" "It is the reason you are not homeless yet," I said. "Mom took out a second mortgage on this house 6 months ago, $150,000. Where did that money go?" "Grant?" Grant looked at our mother. "Mom, you said that was from Dad's retirement account. You said it was an early inheritance." "She lied," I said. "Just like you lie. It runs in the family. She mortgaged the roof over her head to fund your lifestyle because she was too terrified to let you fail. She bought your illusion with her security." "Is that true?" Grant asked, his voice rising. "You leveraged the house? Mom, if this business deal does not close, the market crash will wipe us out. You put the house at risk?" The irony was so thick I could taste it. The man who had forged my signature was now lecturing his mother on risk management. "I had to," my mother cried out, tears spilling over again. "You told me you needed capital. You said you would pay it back double in a year. I believed you, Grant. I always believe you." "And that is the problem," I said, slamming my hand on the table. The sound made the pastry box jump. "You believed him so much that you were willing to sacrifice me to keep his lie alive." I turned to my father. He was staring at his hands, his face gray. "And you," I said to him, "you knew. You signed the employment verification for the car. You knew about the second mortgage. You watched your wife drown in debt, and you watched your son turn into a criminal. And you sat there and did nothing. You let them treat me like a bank account because you were too weak to stop them." "I wanted peace," Howard whispered. "There is no peace in a lie, Dad," I said. "There is only delay." I reached into my briefcase again. This time, I pulled out a thick envelope. It was sealed with the official stamp of the district attorney's office. "I told you I was going to the authorities," I said. "I lied." Grant let out a breath, a sudden expulsion of relief. "Oh, thank God. Sarah, thank you. I knew you wouldn't do it. I knew you loved us." I lied about the timing. I finished cold as ice. "I didn't go this morning. I went yesterday afternoon, right after I got off the phone with Sloan. I submitted the affidavit of forgery. I submitted the text messages where you called me a robot. I submitted the video of the apartment. And I submitted the fraudulent car lease application with Dad's verification. The silence that fell over the kitchen was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hitting the block. You filed it? My mother whispered, her face draining of all color. I filed it, I said. There is an active investigation number. It is out of my hands now. I cannot withdraw it. I cannot say it was a mistake. Once you allege fraud and provide forensic evidence, the state takes over. They do not like people who mess with credit bureaus. You sent me to prison, Grant said. He stood up, knocking his chair over. You actually did it. You are a monster. I protected myself, I said, remaining seated. You were dragging me down. Grant, you were going to ruin my credit, my career, and my reputation. I cut the rope. He is your brother, my mother screamed, finding her voice. How could you? How could you destroy him? I didn't destroy him. Mom, I said calmly. You did. You destroyed him the moment you taught him that consequences were for other people. You destroyed him when you paid off his first debt, and his second, and his third. You taught him he was special. Well, the law does not think he is special. The law thinks he is a thief. My father stood up slowly. He looked at Grant, who was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal, muttering about lawyers and fleeing the country. Then he looked at my mother, who was sobbing into her hands. Finally, he looked at me. She is right, Howard said. My mother stopped crying. Grant stopped pacing. We all looked at him. Howard? My mother asked. What did you say? I said she is right, my father repeated, his voice gaining a strength I hadn't heard in 20 years. We did this, Linda. We created this. We let him get away with everything. We lied for him. We stole for him. And look where it got us. We are broke. We are about to lose the house. And we lost our daughter. He walked around the table and stood next to me. He placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. I am sorry, Sarah, he said. I am so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have told you the truth years ago. I was a coward. It was the first time in my life my father had apologized to me without adding a but or a however to the end of the sentence. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I needed to finish this. Thank you, Dad, I said softly. I looked at Grant. He was standing alone in the corner of the kitchen. His mother was too broken to defend him. His father had turned against him. His girlfriend was gone. The investors never existed. There is one way to mitigate this, I said to Grant. The detective told me that if you surrender and cooperate, they might go easier on you. They might look at a plea deal for probation and restitution instead of jail time. But you have to stop running. You have to stop lying. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. What is this? Grant asked, eyeing it suspiciously. It is a confession of judgment for the back rent, I said, and a formal statement admitting that you forged the signature without my knowledge or consent. If you sign this, I will submit it to the DA. It shows you are taking responsibility. It might keep you out of a cell tonight. Grant looked at the paper. He looked at the pen. His hands were shaking. If I sign this, he said, his voice small, it is over. The reputation, the image, everyone will know. Everyone already knows, Grant, I said. The only person who doesn't know is you. He picked up the pen. He hesitated for a long moment, looking at my mother as if waiting for her to swoop in and save him one last time. But she just stared at the table, defeat etched into every line of her face. Grant signed. He dropped the pen and slumped against the counter, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. I took the paper and put it in my briefcase. I closed the latches with a loud, final click. I stood up. Mom, I said. She looked up at me, her eyes full of a mixture of hatred and grief. I am leaving now, I said. I am going to live my life, my real life, the one I paid for, the one I built without lies. You have a choice to make. You can keep enabling him and lose this house within 6 months, or you can sell it, pay off your debts, and force him to get a job. Real work. Not consulting, not investing, work. "You are leaving us?" she whispered. "Just like that?" "I am not leaving you," I said. "I am resigning. I am resigning from the position of family banker. I am resigning from the role of the backup plan. And I am resigning from being the audience for Grant's performance." I walked to the door. My father followed me. "Sarah," he said when we were on the porch, "will I see you again?" "I don't know, Dad," I said honestly. "I think we all need some time. A lot of time." "I understand," he said. He looked at the driveway where my car was parked. A sensible, paid-off sedan, sitting next to my mother's least luxury SUV. "I am proud of you. You know, I never said it enough, but I am. You are the only one of us who actually made it." "I know," I said. I walked to my car. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the window where my mother was likely watching. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. As I merged onto the highway, heading back toward the city, toward my office, toward the life that belonged wholly and completely to me, I turned off the radio. I didn't need music. I didn't need noise. For the first time in 32 years, the silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was just silence, clean, clear, and paid for. The truth had burned everything down, just as I knew it would. But as I looked at the skyline of Beacon Heights rising in the distance, I realized something important. Forest fires are destructive, yes, but they also clear the dead wood. They make room for new things to grow, and for the first time, I had plenty of room. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the twists and turns of Sarah's journey to justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a busy city like Beacon Heights, or somewhere quiet in the countryside? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about revenge, karma, and family secrets exposed, please make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Don't forget to hit that like button. And if you really want to support the channel, smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next story.